Hi, everyone. Welcome. We're really excited to have you here today for Customer Discovery and Tough Tech. I want to let you know this is going to be a very interactive session. We are going to be workshopping some folks' ideas throughout the session and going into breakouts. So it's really important that you all turn your cameras on. I see a few cameras off, so if you could go ahead and turn those on, that would be great. And so we have here today behind me Tom Clay, who is the CEO of Xtalic Company, which is a company that creates metals and metal coatings with breakthrough properties through proprietary control of nanostructures. Tom's also an HBS Executive Fellow, an MBA 97. And then we have Michael Schrader here, who, if you came to our Tough Tech session last week, was here with us with Satish. He's the co-founder and CEO of Vaxxus. He is also an executive fellow here at HBS. And Vaxxus is developing novel technology to transform how vaccines and medications are administered. So super excited to have them both here today to lead us through this session. And thanks again for engaging and actively participating and turning your cameras on for the duration of the session. All right, thank you.
Hey, good morning, everybody. It's good to see you. Good to see a few familiar faces, so that's a pleasure. Hope you're having a good summer. So we're going to take today in three parts. We're going to do a little bit of a setup of some of the key concepts that was covered in the note that we sent out, but also some of the key ideas that get covered in the Tough Tech Ventures class in the second year, which many of you might be interested in taking. Kind of in the middle, Michael and I will have a little bit of a conversation around sort of goal setting and deliverables for Tough Tech. We know that you're in a sprint now over the summer to get to some meaningful place with your venture. So we'll just talk about some lessons, some things we've seen there. And then we are going to go into a breakout. We've got a couple folks that have already raised their hands to workshop their idea. And so we'll take any other volunteers when we're ready. And then we'll break out for, say, 10 or 15 minutes. People can just talk about the issues they're facing, kind of where they are with their venture. And then we'll come back and recap as a group. So I think that'll take us through 90 minutes. At any point, if you have any questions, please just raise your hand. The more this is just a conversation and the more it's helpful to you, the better. That's why we're here. Quick intros. So thank you for the setup from Emily. So I'm Tom Clay. Right now I'm an executive fellow. I've been working in the Tough Tech executive fellow range for a while, helping with all things Tough Tech. I was assigned to the Tough Tech Ventures second year class for the first couple of years that was taught. So I hope that you're considering taking that class with Josh Krieger and Jim Matheson. It's a cool class. And I am now moving into a faculty role supporting the first year MSMBA cohort. So hello to my MSMBAs from last cycle. Great to see you folks. And we'll be doing that again in the fall. And I'll be asking for your help to sort of in process the new crew that'll be arriving in August. Michael, maybe could you just spend a little bit of time on your background?
Yeah, wonderful. Well, good to see many of you again from last week, familiar faces. The intro was great. You know, just to give a little more emphasis on my background, mechanical engineer originally, started in the auto industry as a design engineer before coming to HBS and starting Vaxxus, which is kind of both the material science and medical device space. So really, really love products that take a long time and a lot of scientific efforts to get to market. Joined this summer as an executive fellow, really with the hope of supporting those of you who are considering taking that crazy leap into Tough Tech Ventures.
Probably the most important thing will be on the last slide, which is our contact information. If any time during the summer or any time at all you want to workshop something, just send us a note and we'll set up a Zoom or a meeting. Very, very happy to help. And I skipped over my commercial. So in between the time I graduated now, I've only worked in Tough Tech in 3D printing, specialty materials, currently CEO of a company, but also been an advisor and board member for a bunch of startups in the Tough Tech space. So let me go through a couple of the concepts that were covered in the note and are covered in the class of Tough Tech Ventures. So first we'll talk a little bit about what Tough Tech is, or how do we define it, what's included. We're going to talk a little bit about how to set milestones. I know that you're a month into your summer, so you're probably getting ready to pivot or well along with your concept, or at some stage of doing that. But basically, if your life is in Tough Tech, you're always setting the next 60 to 90 day milestone. So we'll talk a little bit about what those look like. We have some frameworks that are used in the class. If we're having a good conversation, we'll probably skip those because you can see those later. So tough tech. So it typically is going to be something that requires an invention along the way. Some tough tech are sort of integration of established technologies and marketplaces put together in a new way. But oftentimes there's at least one piece of the venture that is truly new to the world that requires some invention and all of the complexity and time that comes along with working with something truly, truly new. These are all shots of things that are actually in the Tough Tech Ventures class, different approaches, but each of these has something physical, some physical sciences aspect that's new to the world, and in order to get it to market, they got to solve those problems along the way, along with all the other problems. A simple way to think about it is that the Tough Tech Ventures face both commercial and technical uncertainty. So because this is HBS, we had to have a 2x2, and you can see, toilet paper is a good example. We know we need it. It's not a particularly complicated product, although I'm sure there's a lot of art and science that goes into making it well. Something like SaaS, you're typically not dealing with something that requires an invention, a lot of clever work and a lot of hard work, but not probably something that's truly new to the world. Tough Tech Ventures is going to have both. We learn in the first year and throughout the MBA curriculum that if you can have a design, build, test cycle that's rapid, you have these learning cycles that go as fast as you can, that's a good thing. Some businesses lend themselves to actually taking the whole business concept and being able to quickly put up a convincing prototype, get good feedback, and know what to do next. We work really hard to do that in Tough Tech Ventures, but there's a lot of other things that you need to think about if you're coming up with your minimum viable product and putting it out in the world. So you've got stuff like IP. You need to make sure you've got right to practice. You need to make sure your own IP position is clear. You're almost certainly going to depend on your revenue model and your business success on IP. Information asymmetry. So if you're dropping a technology into a complicated process, you can become a master of what you do, but there's going to be a lot of deep knowledge upstream and downstream from you that you're not going to know when you start. So there's an enormous amount of learning. There are things that your customers won't tell you that you have to figure out as you go. So a lot of learning to do. For some products, like for the material science products that I work on and some of you may work on, there's a lot of complexity in the supply chain. You need to pick where in the supply chain you want to drop in. You need to figure out all the requirements that didn't show up on the specification from your customer. Not only do you have to be able to make the product and have it work consistently, but it also has to be consistent with all the upstream and downstream processes in manufacturing, complicated supply chains. Sometimes you've got complicated regulation. So it just means that when you're doing these design, build, test cycles, you may have to selectively pick just part of it to work on, and in general, they're going to take longer. So a good summary is with Tough Tech, you're going to have fewer shots on goal. You're going to work really hard to tee up these important trials, and you're not going to get too many bites at the apple. So when you're talking about a really complete end customer validation, you're going to be able to do one. You'll take a step back and you'll learn, but they may take 6 months or a year to tee up. In case of a medical product, it can take longer. Higher burden of proof. So you're often not able to get away with a low fidelity prototype. You actually have to make something that works and delivers all the way to the end for the customer. So there can be a lot of sort of extra hurdles you need to go through to be able to prove that. And because you've got fewer shots on goal and you've got sort of a higher proof case typically, there's a big return on analytical planning, and what I just added in this morning is really experiment design. So if you can, for example, negotiate with your customer and say, I understand you want this full qualification that's got 15 elements, but what's the one thing I can show you first that will change your confidence level and make you more excited about this project or less excited about this project? Is it possible we can pick sort of one coupon test or one simple test on just a few variables? We can take a look at that. We'll decide together then, is this a good idea to keep going, or is it something we can take a step back on? A lot of the work that people do in Tough Tech is saying, what's the most important part of the problem I can get the most information from most quickly? Let's find a clever way to carve that out, build a specialized test stand, do a limited experiment so I can learn faster. I'm not throwing everything up against the wall against one huge, long trial that's going to have either a go or no-go result at the end. So again, you're going to have these pacing implications. I don't know that it's always slower, but some elements of tough tech are going to be slower. Sometimes the tests themselves take a long time. So you may go into a qualification test that takes 3 to 6 months to move through the whole manufacturing process and go through an environmental test, for example. So there are some things that are slow, but our job as tough tech managers is to move through, get as much information as quickly with as high fidelity as we can. And again, you're typically dealing with not just do people want the product, but can I make this thing work at all? Will the science support it? During the time I'm working on it, will the need go away, or will an alternative emerge that can fill that need? Because we're typically going to be working on things that may take you 48 months to get to market, 24 months to get to market, and the world keeps changing while you're there. So I hope this isn't discouraging. The good things about tough tech is you really can have an impact. The world needs products that last longer, work better, use less energy, cause less harm to the environment, are cheaper and more accessible to people. And all of that's going to require tough tech to deliver. So it's a really important work. It's sort of a mission. If part of your makeup is you want to be mission-driven, through your career, at least I find a great sense of mission here in tough tech. So don't be discouraged. But there's a lot of things to recognize and navigate through as you jump into your venture. One last slide, and then I'm going to move more into a conversation with Michael because I know he's got a lot of scars and lessons to teach here about some of these things. You have these important learning curves really in any business, but in tough tech, I think it's important to pay special attention to them. You're often working with economies of scale issues where you don't have the economics you need when you're at small scale, and you don't. You've got this important economy of scale target to hit to get to large volume, and that can give you some uncertainty because it's going to take you some time to validate that you can hit not only the performance and the quality, but the price. It's really important, like I said, to break down the problem in clever ways so you can learn as fast as you can, get your hands on things as fast as you can. Big opportunity to do that in tough tech. Early in your tough tech journey, you may be still banking on an R&D breakthrough. So you do have these things that might be something that you innovate on and reach success. It might be something that happens in the market space next to you that you need to be watching carefully. And then there's the aspect of time. And in particular, it's useful to think about time. One thing the engineers at my company hate is when we change plans. So we get a good plan, we get a working plan, then something changes and we say, okay, what you're doing yesterday, we're not doing anymore, we're doing this new thing. Usually what drives those changes is because something's happened with our customer or something's happened in the marketplace along the course that we've set. So we have a 2-year plan, moving along the plan, but then something changes in the marketplace, some new innovation occurs somewhere else, and so we need to react to that. So we try to condition our team that change is good. We don't want to change what you're working on, but if something changes on the outside, we're going to tell you what that is. We're going to help, try to get you on board with it, and then we're going to focus on the new problem. So we were thinking about where you are in your summer. So you're a month in on your venture. In some cases, you're much longer in if you've been working on a venture all year. Usually, we break up almost all the work, at least in my companies, into these shorter chunks. We want to say, what can we learn and absorb and make progress on in 60 to 90 days? We want to know, how can I change my confidence interval? So I want to feel better or worse about the problem I'm working on. So if I can do something that's going to make me feel, yes, I feel like there's a good signal here, or no, this is not looking as promising. I want to focus on what can kill me, especially early on if there are things that are threshold items for your business that could absolutely knock you out of contention. We sort of keep a running list of what can kill us and keep going back and checking. Is there an update in the market? Has something changed? I want to have good visibility on that. The other thing is the most important investment you're making is with your time. And so if you're working on a tough tech venture, either for you or for potential investors or new teammates that you want to bring on, you want to be able to sort of crystallize deliverable targets that you can kind of take to the bank. So we'll talk about what some of those are, but an example is like if you have a letter of intent with a key beachhead customer. That's something that you can probably get funded on. It's something that you can recruit a great team on. You're not going to have what some businesses have, which is the ability to say, well, I did a test case. I've got an amazing market uptake. We're off to the races. All we need to do is make this product in time. You're going to have to pick meaningful targets that you can hit along the way, because you're typically in tough tech, it's going to take a little while. So you're not going to get to that big bankable deliverable right away. So maybe Michael, if you want to come up here with me, maybe we can just talk a little bit about, I don't know if this framing works for you or if this looks familiar for things that you did in your businesses. So maybe just I'll go on the first one, and if any of these resonate with you, you can just fill in. One of the main things, if you're working on licensing a new technology or you're meeting a new technical team in a university setting, there's a big difference between a technology having capability and having advantage. And that's probably obvious to you, but most new researchers, when they're coming up with something new, are very focused on the capability. I've developed this new material, I've developed this new device, I'm able to solve this problem. And that's really exciting, but that doesn't mean it's the best way to solve the problem. And it doesn't mean that the customer is going to pay the cost that this solution represents to solve the problem. And so if I'm looking to change my confidence interval, so in a summer project like this, I'm working on a new venture, and I'm trying to figure out, do I have a technology fit for this? I would probably invest time both in, do I think I'm on a roadmap to solve this problem in a compelling way? And from a cost, performance, alternative point of view, I'm not the only horse in the race. How are these other horses to the left and right looking? At the end of the summer, do I feel more confident that I can maintain that unique or at least head start position? Or are there actually a lot of ways to get at this problem, and I'm going to be lost in the noise of a dozen new solutions? So something I'd think about. Any of these ring a bell with you,
Yeah,
Michael?
so honestly on that first one, I think particularly in the tough tech sector, so many of us start with academic technologies. And the best line that I was told after getting burned by an academic technology was we should look at publications as inspiration rather than kind of, necessarily hard and fast data that we should bank on. And so the clearest example I'll give, when we first started Vaxxus, one of the papers that inspired us was a paper from Tufts that essentially showed that we could take a measles, mumps, rubella vaccine, add in a new stabilizer, and essentially with that stabilizer, get this vaccine stable for months on end at elevated temperatures. So the implication there was we could take vaccines that usually have to be refrigerated and move them into a non-refrigerated distribution network. We were very excited by this. The issue was the professors at Tufts had compared this stabilizer versus no stabilizer whatsoever. And so when you did a head-to-head comparison, it looked like our stabilizer was phenomenal, but they were not comparing to the gold standard. So as soon as we took that data and went out into industry, the first question we got back from every single pharma company was, well, I understand you can take a vaccine with no stabilizer and beat it. Can you beat the best other stabilizers that are on the market today? And so that was a helpful point of reference for us from folks in the industry. And we basically had to go back and rerun that experiment because the controls that the academics had used were not the right controls. It wasn't the gold standard. So we didn't really know how our technology stacked up. So those are the kind of things you've got to look for when you're starting with academic technologies is, I think to Tom's point, oftentimes their goal is getting an interesting paper out. Or in many cases, they'll bring in people who don't have deep industry expertise, so they're just kind of using whatever materials they have, easy access to. But making sure that you do have not only capability but advantage is key starting point.
Yeah, you remind me, I was an advisor for a company that made this thermal reflective paint. Basically, it was super reflective paint that would prevent heat absorption and actually had a cooling function, had a nanoform surface, and it was really, really interesting. But they hadn't done this benchmarking against the alternative. The cost points were so radically different. So yeah, we basically had to redesign the whole experimental benchmark set from the beginning in a clean way that industry would recognize.
Precisely.
So,
yep.
There's an important aspect to tough tech, which is not only problem intensity, but durability. So you want to work on a problem that's really intense for the customer, that is going to solve a big problem for them. Either create a brand new technology, brand new capability, save them a lot of money. It usually has to have a big win. So if I'm looking at a new technology in tough tech and it's a 5% better than the alternative, maybe you can make a business case, but and if you landed with the 5% in the end, you probably could build a good business. But along the way, usually what happens if you start with something you think is going to be a 5% advantage, things will come up. And maybe you won't land at the end with that 5% advantage preserved. most of the companies I've worked with, we've started off with like a 10 times advantage on a key thing for the customer. By the time we actually finished it, it was 2 or 3. So good enough, but a lot of learning along the way and making it fit meant, okay, we can't run it as fast as we thought. We can't save as much as we thought. It gets too close to the quality threshold line. And then durability is a time measure, at least in this case I mean it to be. You're going to be working on the problem for a while. So a lot of tough tech companies will work on savings against a commodity, for example. So might say, I'm going to save versus a barrel of petroleum, or I'm going to save against an ounce of gold, or I'm going to save against something. Over a long period of time, you can be exposed to a lot of volatility, and that problem that you're working on can get a lot less intense. And so, scenario analysis helps. You want to look at what the volatility for these things have been historically, if that's the problem. But you basically just want to make sure the customer, if it's a big problem, and they're probably still going to have that same problem in 5 years. Yeah. Does that ring any bells?
No, it does. And I think the key element of this, in my opinion, to being a great tough tech CEO is you've got to spend a fair amount of time trying to look into the future, right? And I think the best CEOs are able to look out 10 years out, try and figure out other technology trends that may be coming in and intersecting what you're trying to do, right? So, in the case of Vaxxus, our core technology was basically we could take vaccines that were traditionally injected and put them in a patch that patients could apply themselves that were shelf stable. So we could, again, ship them without refrigerating. When we first started this work, we were selling, our tagline was basically, we were going to mail vaccines to patients' homes. And the feedback we got from every single pharma company is that will never happen, right? The complexities of asking a patient to self-administer a vaccine are too high. The FDA will never allow it. Disposal on the back end is too complex. No one will ever administer vaccines at home. But I think the interesting insight that we had when we were beginning to build Vaxxus is that the telemedicine space was blowing up in parallel. So you had a lot of organizations coming along that were really creating some very, very clever tools to allow patients to kind of do things from the comfort of their own home, but do it while engaged with a healthcare provider. So there was a COVID test, for example, that Abbott launched back in the window when we needed to have a proof that we had a negative COVID test to fly or to get into an event. Basically, Abbott allowed you to do the full COVID test via teleconference with a healthcare provider on the other end. And so they watched you do the swab, they watched you put the swab in the test kit, they watched you basically read out the test kit. When that was all done, you got a very nice, digital document on your phone that suggested COVID-free, right? Go do your event. So there were technologies coming along in the background that we thought could help us support this concept of moving vaccines into the home. So many of our peers decided to go for lower hanging fruit. They said, we'll just have a patch that's applied in the doctor's office. We wanted to swing for the fences and say, forget that. We're going to design this system from day one to mail into patients' homes. But part of that was kind of a belief or a guess that the ecosystem around us would evolve in order to get to a point where it supported that. Unfortunately, because of COVID, everything was accelerated and that hypothesis came true. But I think to Tom's point, spending a lot of time thinking about what the future is going to look like, what other technologies are going to come in, how those might impact what you're trying to do. And again, I'll say trying to be aggressive with what you're trying to do to make sure you can stay ahead of those curves.
Yeah, your advantage as a newcomer will be that you're taking a bet on the thing that's going to change. So that's a great point. Yeah. There's a lot of smart people that are incumbents that will solve the incremental problem. So that's probably not your in. Is this a beachhead or is it an opportunity of scale? That's just a lot of discipline about going back and reviewing your assumptions. A lot of times something that seems like a market of scale becomes a beachhead, becomes something really small when you actually figure out who has that problem that you're trying to solve. In terms of team formation, a lot of times when I'm talking to Rock Summer Fellows, many of you are already on teams that have been together for a while, so this may apply a little bit less to you. But one way to change your confidence interval about should I spend more time on this through the school year and maybe launch this as my venture when I graduate is bringing on someone who adds to the team. Could be a technical team member, could be an advisor, could be someone that you just work with really well. So a lot of times I'll see the teams that leave the summer with momentum because they love their idea, have also built out their team. That's a great way to reduce risk. If you find somebody that's technically knowledgeable or market knowledgeable or is just a good teammate, that makes you much more resilient, much more likely to succeed.
Yeah, let me just jump in really quickly. For those of you who are thinking about team building and HR type issues, one of the transformational books for me was a book called Who, W-H-O, and it's written actually by a PhD, I don't know if it's in behavioral science, something like that, but did a lot of research on what ultimately you can evaluate while you're choosing teammates that correlates with eventual success in the role. And the single biggest indicator of potential likelihood for success is if the person has done what you need them to do in a past role successfully, which should not be a particularly surprising thing. One of the things we did not do correctly at Vaxis is we waited way too long to bring on senior people that helped us with that. So we ended up hiring a wonderful woman in 2019 named Linda Tussey. She came on as our Chief Development Officer. She had taken 3 or 4 flu vaccines into the clinic, knew exactly what that pathway needed to look like, had done it over and over and over again. And she just fundamentally changed the organization. So one of the things that I think I see very, very frequently is, teams, particularly teams coming out of business schools or out of PhD programs, will surround themselves with their peers. And that's great. A lot of smart, people who are very excited to go out and pursue this, but getting some veterans on the team early. And I would say in a full-time role, not just as advisors, where these people are, really, really committed to what you're trying to do, was a mistake we made. We waited way too long to do that.
Yeah, that's a good point. So both the companies that I've been part of as the CEO early recruited someone who came out of the space that we were trying to go in. And that was incredibly important. We couldn't have been successful because we knew how to make, in the case of Ixtalic, a specialized alloy that had a certain hardness and a certain wear characteristic, but we didn't understand anything about building electronics components. And so to have someone in who said, here's the checklist, these are the 15 things you need to do before we can go to market. And you could do that this summer. You could find an advisor who is an expert in the space if you've got a whole. People love to help student teams at Harvard. A lot of what we do in the MS MBA is try to create connections, bring experts in. So if you've got a hole you're trying to fill, an expert consultant, an early advisor spot that you're thinking about, just let us know and we'll find somebody who would love to help you. Probably has a lot of interesting information and background. What can kill me? So why take this aggressively depressing position? A lot of companies don't keep monitoring the things that could be tectonic shifts that would make them want to pivot, and so they run too long. I was talking with there's a specialist VC firm that looks at materials that's aligned with breakthrough energy. One of their key problems when I was talking to them last week was the management teams for these tough tech ventures that they're supporting throw down the gas pedal too early. Or they throw down the gas pedal and then they don't pull it off when something changes. And so they burn through a ton of capital without getting to the next proof point, and then it gets hard to raise money again. So something to think about. So unworkable adoption costs. Sometimes you get so excited about the way you solve the problem that you don't take a step back and say, what would it cost for this customer to adopt this in their process? One example is early on, there was another technology in the field that actually performed better than ours. But ours was a process-compatible drop-in to the existing manufacturing process, and theirs was going to require a complete re-engineering of the engineering process. So you could end up with something that's a great solution, works in the lab, but it just can't work at scale, or it can't work in the existing supply chain that your customers have.
Yeah, no, I think getting back to that comment of bringing in advisors who know this sequence up and down, I think the criticality of that and helping you identify what these risks look like is really, really important. And that supply chain issue is always overlooked, right? When I was an engineer at Honda, we had people coming in with innovations all the time that we loved from an engineering perspective. But what they didn't realize is that Honda does not make a lot of the components on our cars. We have a supply chain of suppliers that make the components in the cars. So you can pitch us till you're blue in the face. Doesn't really matter. We need to go pitch this to Bosch and have them actually design, engineer, work with you to get this product the point where it can be adopted. It's just way too hard to kind of become a new supplier for Honda. So the importance of understanding those things early in the process can't be overstated.
Another thing to look for is cascading miracles. So there's a case about, I'm going to forget the name of the company, but the company that was an Israeli electric car startup early on that raised billions and billions of dollars and flamed out in a magnificent way. It basically says, the idea here is, do I require a breakthrough innovation in more than one place in my product? So if you're innovating and doing invention, high risk, high reward invention, maybe in just one part of the business, maybe just on the technical part, that's going to be helpful. If you're also requiring a major reorganization of the value chain, or you're also requiring a major change in customer behavior, or there's some next-gen thing that's in the pipeline in 5 years that you can see, that you're going to try to track to, if you've daisy chained all of these low probability, high risk events together, that can be a problem. So one example is when our company was founded, it was founded on a clean tech premise based on a regulatory change that was coming to outlaw hexavalent chromium. The material doesn't really matter, but we were gonna have this environmentally friendly, safe replacement for this hazardous known problem material. We nailed it. We were on the cover of the John Deere annual report because we were going to revolutionize and help them move into the next generation. Hexavalent chromium is still legal today, 10 years later. So if you've got something that's requiring a whole bunch of changes or a whole bunch of innovations at once, you at least want to keep an eye on that. It's a little bit better if you're picking something where there's one thing or two things maybe that you're doing this enormous innovation on when you're designing your venture.
Yeah, I love the initial founding days of Tesla. To me, were just fascinating. Everybody knows the Model S. Many people remember the Tesla Roadster, which was really the first vehicle that they actually launched and sold. The beauty of the Roadster to me is rather than re-engineering an entire vehicle, which is a massive undertaking, Tesla partnered with Lotus. They basically brought in the Lotus Elise, which was an extremely lightweight chassis that had a lot of very desirable driving dynamics, and they partnered with Lotus to basically retrofit it with an electrical engine, batteries that were obviously suitable for that, and then there were some other tweaks and modifications they had to make around cooling systems and things like that. But fundamentally, rather than starting from scratch inventing a vehicle, Elon Musk wanted to show the world that electric power was far superior in terms of performance, and he did it with the lowest risk approach he could. That car was pretty transformational, and I think inspired a lot of investors to come behind and say, okay, now it's worth the effort of actually going in and designing a vehicle like the Model S from scratch to fully implement that. But it was the lowest risk way to validate the technology, get it into customers' hands.
A point we've covered already, I think, so maybe we'll zip past because I want to be talking to you, be more of a conversation. Is just being aware of how competition, supply chain, customer behavior is going to change over time. Because if it's a tough tech venture, you're going to be at it for a few years probably before you get to market. And things can change that will help you, and things can change that will hurt you. You might be working on something that has a good, interesting fit, and a new need might emerge that you can pivot and jump on. There are many success cases that look like that. If you take the Tough Tech Ventures course, you'll see a number of things where working hard to develop for one application, something changes somewhere else, smart, rapid pivot, much bigger market, interesting company success. So deliverable targets, again, in the conversation that we'll have with you in a second, definitely want to be talking with you or being helpful if we can about selecting deliverable targets. These are things that you can very reasonably achieve in a summer of work that can help you decide, do I want to continue, help you raise money successfully if that's something that you're looking to do. Some of these are like a letter of intent from a beachhead customer. That's sort of the gold standard. If you can get actually someone to say, if you can do what you say you're going to do, we will buy this. That's a good calling card to have. In tough tech in general, again, you're not going to have this full proven out business case typically. You're going to be trying to find some proxy for market success that you can get to earlier. And so that's one example. I don't know, in your history, do you have any examples where you pulled in an early, like what did you need to raise money? What were some of the deliverables you assembled when you were going for a funding round?
No, we did. And our first deal at Vaxxas was a $60,000 deal that ultimately did allow us to get our first venture round. So it was not a huge dollar amount contract, but it was just that stamp of validation from a big pharma partner in our case that allowed us to get over the hump. So we had to be very creative in how we fulfilled that, which becomes the downstream challenge once you've actually gotten a commitment or money coming in, but you don't necessarily have the team and the infrastructure to actually deliver on that. You've got to get pretty scrappy and creative, but that was the key for us in the early funding rounds.
Yeah, we raised our B round on a letter of intent that also had a customer prepay. So if you're able to get the customer to actually give you a deposit against future sales or something that has a check attached to it, that can also be pretty powerful. I know a bunch of folks that have worked hard all summer on ideas, and part of what they wanted to pull out of it, if they're working in concert with the university lab, was some sort of guarantee that they were going to have a first cut at getting a license. So I don't know if anyone's in that situation. If you are, we can certainly talk about that. It's a pretty important step, and it's a good thing to focus on early because you may have a great runway there, or you may find that the people you're working with have other ideas, or the university you're working with has other ideas for what's going to happen with that technology. Better to know sooner. Did you end up licensing your technology from Tufts?
We did, yeah.
Okay.
So we had a license from Tufts for 5 or 6 patents. I think we talked about that a little bit last week. They were important to get the early funding, and then over time, we actually, as a company, made a strategic priority to try and move away from those as much as we could and really generate our internal IP. But it was critical for that initial financing to have some, core IP that we could bank on.
And you did the Xtalic case last week.
We did talk through the Xtalic case last week.
So maybe you know a little bit
Exactly.
more about Xtalic than I think. Okay. So I'll tell you what happened at the end too, if you want at the end. Both the companies that I've run have been MIT licensees. Both had good engagement with the inventor, the PI lab, inventor of the technology. Maybe just if you're in this situation, just reach out. There's a lot to know. It's easy to get a template for how these things work. They generally follow a formula, and you can get very well prepared for your first negotiation meeting pretty quickly. So reach out if that's an option, if that's something you're interested in. A good deliverable is just high quality customer interviews. Typically, if we're going into a new segment, I'll say let's keep interviewing people until we've talked to people that cover more than 50% of the opportunity in the segment we're going at. Sometimes that's not that many people. So it could be that if you're in the mobile phone market, you can talk to just a couple people and end up knowing what 50% of the volume is going to look like. Other markets, it might be different. That's a useful thing to spend time on. Also, if you have a prioritized list of what your technical milestones are, typically if people are going all out during the summer, now they're back in school, they can put 50% time on their venture, but not 100% anymore. If you've got that list and you've got a partner you can work with to move through those during the school year, sometimes the pacing of knocking technical milestones off the list works okay with a second year curriculum. Sometimes they take a little while to do, so that can kind of fit in so you can study in between until you get the information and work like crazy until you're ready for the next test. Okay, anything else on deliverable targets before we talk? We're about at the halfway point, so it's a good time to go to the teams.
Nope,
okay, so we had a few folks volunteer to basically talk about where they are in their summer venture, what's coming next, how to think about it. What we thought we'd do is create breakout groups for each of the people who volunteered to do this, and then we'll just randomly assign everybody else to join one of those. And what I'd encourage you to do is just tee it up. This is where I am. This is what I'm doing. This is the kind of problem that I'm solving, and just talk about it with the group that's with you in the breakout. We'll stay in breakout for maybe 10 minutes or so. Then we'll come out and ask everybody to just introduce to the whole group. This is my venture. This is what I'm thinking about. This is the problem. This is what I heard, and then we can all sort of participate and talk a little bit about it. So I have Conrad and Ian and Adi and Chris as volunteers. And Sarah, do you want to volunteer too?
No, I just wanted to mention Conrad said that he actually is doing a container delivery right now, so he's going to be a little bit late, but he'll be back.
Oh, okay, good. Well, I look forward to hearing about his venture. I saw in an email that he's already up and running, right? He's already selling product? Yeah, well, that's great. Okay, well, why don't we'll just ask him to explain what he's doing to the whole group when he comes back. Does anyone else want to spend a little bit of time on a problem they're right in front of right now? Because we can create another breakout group if we want to do that. Okay, looks like we're good with these. So I don't know if you probably haven't been in this space, but you feel like you're in the Starship Enterprise, and there are all these people who are helping that you can't see, but they're listening. So whoever is going to help move us into breakout rooms, I want to make sure Ian and Adi and Chris are in a room, and then everyone else gets randomly assigned to one of those three. Thanks, we'll see you soon. We'll pull you back out in about 10 minutes. Okay, I hope that was not too jarring. Are we all back? Did they cut you off mid-sentence? I hope they, did you get some notice, like a countdown that the end was coming? Okay, good. So what I'd love to do is hear from each of the groups, and then Conrad, I know you had to step out, so maybe we can do is hear from the three breakout groups first, and then Conrad, I'd love to hear where you are with your venture and sort of what's next for you, too. So why don't we start off with Ian? Ian, if you could just quickly, just for everyone that wasn't in your breakout, explain what the venture is, where you are with it, and then what you heard from the group.
Yeah, no, happy to. So I'm working on a startup that's focusing on the hydrogen economy. So clean hydrogen can be used either as like a chemical to decarbonize different industries, can be used as an energy storage molecule, can be run through a fuel cell and produce electricity. And so there's a ton of federal grant funding effectively going into this space to kickstart this industry. But one of the big issues with hydrogen is that it's very difficult to transport because it's such a small molecule. And so we're working on a solution that makes hydrogen transport more economically feasible just because it's so expensive right now. And one of the issues that I've been having in terms of like traction with these customer interviews is that because it's such a new space, there's not that many people actually working on hydrogen transport or with much experience with hydrogen transport. Most hydrogen that's produced today is just produced directly on site where it's needed. And the grant funding, there's like, $5 to $6 billion in grant funding that went out the door 6 months ago. So that's not fully built out yet. And so have been kind of having conversations either with folks that are thinking about, how do we start blending hydrogen into natural gas pipelines, into existing infrastructure, or, we're working on this big project, but we haven't really figured out what transportation looks like yet because we're so focused on how are we producing hydrogen. And so it's kind of a little bit caught in the middle. A lot of the conversations I've had thus far have been more theoretical than people who actually have experience with the pain points of transporting hydrogen long distances in the way that it will likely be done in future. And I've also been, because I've been approaching it more as like, hey, would love to learn more about your pain points, what you're thinking about, versus I'm pitching you a solution. And one of the things that Aditya mentioned is that he's kind of been having customer conversations as well. And he's found that there's a lot more interest when he's offering a solution to a customer versus when they're just having like a conversation about what the pain points are. And so I think that's definitely something that I'll try out in terms of saying, hey, we're licensing this technology from Lawrence Berkeley National Lab. Want to get a sense of how this would plug into your current supply chain, what you're doing right now, and kind of use that as the vector for discovering pain points versus I've been more reaching out like, hey, I'm an HBS student, would love to learn about your struggles here without necessarily offering a solution.
Okay, got it. So a little bit more solution-focused conversation, still early, but more like, I've got this idea that we're workshopping, I'd love to get your feedback on it. How have you done in getting to the right kinds of people? You mentioned it's been a little bit challenging finding people who either have expertise or focus on the transport problem. Do you feel like do you have two problems to solve then? One is to have a better point of entry to the conversation, and the other is to find the right people. Do you still need the right people? Or do you feel like you've got those?
No, I'd say it's definitely two problems.
Okay.
One, the people that I'm getting are people that are maybe a layer or two either above or removed from people that actually know what like the day-to-day pain points are. And then two, that component around getting the folks that I am connected with interested enough to try to have them connect me with the folks that have the day-to-day pain points, or getting responses on the folks I'm reaching out to that are the more day-to-day folks.
Okay, so you're obviously going to master this evolving solution from the laboratory part, and I guess if anyone in the group here has ideas for points of entry to people who might have more expertise, that'd be welcome, right? If we gin up something, if I go back to my desk and try to gin up people I think might be more specific to hydrogen transport, we should forward those on to you.
That'd be awesome.
This is a little bit of a fly ball, but if you talk to Toyota, because they had a huge fuel cell program and have people that are specialists in supply chain transport.
I haven't. I actually got that recommendation from, I want to say, Sarah last week. So yes, that is something that I need to do. If
you'd like, they have an in-house ventures group that specializes in all things hydrogen, and I know the guy who runs that. If you feel ready and want to talk to him, they're a pretty good outfit because they will connect you with the subject matter expert as part of their process. So
I will say the other two automakers that invested heavily in that were Honda and BMW. So Toyota, Honda, and BMW were the three that kind of pledged to that over electric cars. I don't know how well that's worked out for them, but yeah, those three entities. So I could certainly help bridge the gap on the Honda side as well. I know they made a massive effort in that. For a while, they had something called the hydrogen home fueling system, which was kind of solar powers creating hydrogen in home. So they spent a ton of money on that, honestly. I don't think it panned out well for them.
Okay.
Yeah, no, would love the intro to either the Toyota Ventures team, or I think Honda is also a relatively big player in trucking. And so I think that's maybe a more relevant entry point for Honda, which would be super cool.
Okay. It's on my action item list. Anything else from Ian? Any reactions to folks who are in Ian's group? Then we'll move to Adi. Okay. Adi, why don't you fill us in? First, I hope I'm saying your name right. Is that?
Yeah, it's perfect. It's perfect.
Okay. Yeah, please, if you could just let us know what your venture is, where you are, and then what you heard from your group.
Sure. So my co-founder Aditya is also on this call. So what we're trying to solve is a broader market context. In India, there's obviously rising energy prices, exponentially growing energy needs, because like there will be an air conditioning that is being sold every 60 seconds for next like 20 years or so, and then pollution is causing millions of deaths. What this is enabling is massive increase or a demand for renewable energy sources, and also just like energy increase. And the biggest enabler for that will be a 1 to 4 hour duration grid size battery storage systems. So what we are trying to do is build 1 megawatt hour containerized sodium ion battery energy storage systems. And the reason we are going after sodium ion is because it will, first of all, drastically decrease the cost of battery energy storage systems. And second, it will be much safer to operate in extreme environmental conditions. And then, so our basically value proposition is to offer a low cost battery as a service, sodium ion based battery energy storage systems, which AI assisted battery management systems and virtual power plant software capabilities. And that will basically enable to replace polluting diesel generators as backup, and allow like storing of renewable energy storage, and then also offer significant cost savings and monetization opportunities through virtual power plant. Currently, we are talking to a lot of potential customers. Some of the beachhead market that we are trying to explore are solar manufacturers and installers, premium residential apartments, hospitals, data centers, and then EV charging companies that will enable them to decouple from the grid and also save a lot of cost if they install a battery energy storage system. Some of the challenges that we are facing is obviously it's a chicken and egg problem, where we want to do a more detailed design of the product, but we have to hire more interns or engineers for that. And before that, we need a letter of intent from some of our customers. So we are trying to kind of convince some of our beachhead customers for a forward sales opportunity or a letter of intent. And then also in parallel, working with reaching out to some of the university professors who have deep expertise into it, for some technology licensing, so that we can start building this as quickly as possible. So we had seen some progress. There's a lot of enthusiasm, but we haven't reached to a point where we have received an LOI, so that's where we are at.
Okay. So number one target is getting an LOI, and how big does it have to be? What's the shape of it? Like what's the home run LOI look like?
Yeah, so home run LOI will be a big solar manufacturers who is like have a lot of like projects in pipeline, and then we pick one of these contracts. If we get to a volume of like 3,000 to 6,000 of these units annually, that's kind of a mature steady state. But even to start with, if we get a pilot for 5 units, for example, by next year, and then scale it up from there, that'll be a home run for next year.
Okay. Aditya, I see your hand.
Yeah, just in terms of timeline, like all the companies we're talking to are big names, and that is a certificate for us. So we really want like 1 megawatt hour pilot for now, for the next 1 year while we're at HBS. It's a single product, maybe like 2 or 3 that's honestly how much we can even handle at this point. And then after that, like any of these customers are the types of customers to like scale it up within themselves. They have so much demand internally.
Okay, so it's sort of a beachhead trial almost with one
Yeah.
or two leading companies. It sounds like you've already profiled the major solar developers that you'd go after. You're already talking to them, it sounds like.
Yeah, the stage we're in is there are 4 companies right now who are like, hey, this is super interesting. Why don't you come back with a more detailed, like technical and financial proposal? And I will be in India as well, so trying to meet them in person. But just want to get your thoughts on, we don't want to push them too hard and lose it, but at the same time, we want to make progress over there. And the last part is like getting them to take us seriously, because for their scale, we're tiny. So how do we get that like first LOI trial, knowing that to build for their scale will take us at least three years or so?
Do you have like a bankable name on the technology side? Like, can you say it's coming from a prestigious Harvard lab or MIT lab, or what I'm just trying to think of other things. If I was going to go in, I'd want to say like, yeah, we're small, but we're representing this, unbelievable premium name. You're lucky to even be talking to me.
That we are trying to figure out. So we have reached out to a couple of professors who are very much into sodium ion research, and hopefully we can get some traction there. There's one professor at Harvard too, but like within our background, so I have worked in battery manufacturing at Tesla, Rivian, Apple. That builds some credibility, but we also need a tech IP and an advisor with a critical name to kind of push us forward.
Yeah, if you don't have a lot, the brand will help. I mean, you obviously have a lot of talent, but if you're starting off new, like I would be, that can help. I also I want to know what Michael thinks of this too, but so very similar situation when we were first trying to post-pivot at Exalic. First thing didn't work out. We were trying to get in. We talked to the 4 major companies that we could serve and had detailed conversations, and one of them just had more of an appetite. It was sort of a personality thing. Like one of them was like, yeah, I'm interested in that. I'm an enthusiast. You guys seem interesting connection with an interesting university brand. Yeah, I'm willing to try. So the screening effort was like a disciplined analysis, but in the end, it just came to a personality fit. That this one guy, and he was willing to sign an LOI and willing to give us a check. So I don't know what your take is.
You honestly stole my thunder. I think I would love to know if you feel like you have champions within those organizations that have that kind of enthusiasm, because all of our deals, while at the surface we were selling cool science, cool technology, all the deals that happened because we found one internal champion that was willing to stick their neck out and really go to bat for us, right? Obviously, the higher in the organization, the better. But for something like an LOI, I think, I'm glad to see you're going back to India. I hate to say it, but kind of building that personal relationship, getting to the point where you can talk with them about how important that is for your business. Oftentimes, it's going to be an internal champion who kind of takes that leap of faith and gets you over the hump.
Yeah, I hope that's helpful. What I've done is basically teed up the strongest pitch I had, usually with some letter of intent from a university lab that was interesting, even if that wasn't the lab we ended up partnering with later. Is there anybody in country that would be like a spectacular endorsement? Like if you said, we also, not only are we partnered with a key lab back in the US, here's somebody in India that's like a major player that's on board with us. I'm just thinking of the HBS network. The HBS network is vast and vast in India. Yeah. And so we could crawl through the MBA, alumni directory and pitch people a little bit and warm them up. And even if they're willing to give you a warm intro and be like, hey, look, I've talked to these guys. I'm pretty excited about what they're doing. I don't know if that feels like it'd be helpful, but it's something you could pull off.
Yeah, definitely. And I think we have leveraged that contact, and we have honestly got some really good progress because of those warm contacts from HBS. So hopefully we'll get to a point where we get endorsements from some of the HBS folks and end up in securing an LOI.
Yeah. Well, good. Okay, so I wrote down, I guess, just making sure that you've got all the elements teed up. You're talking to all the right people. It sounds like you already know them, and probably one of them is going to just be a better fit to go first, like more interested, more willing to take a risk, likes you guys.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Anything else we should check in on this one, or anything else from the team that was with you?
One super quick question is to get that credibility, we're at the position where we should start picking advisors. How should we think about who to pick? And because we have professors helping us right now, we have a lot of people helping us, but you can only pick maybe one or two advisors. So just curious to hear your thoughts there.
Go ahead.
So I will challenge that assumption around 1 to 2 advisors. I think at Vaxis, after 12 years, we probably have 20 advisors, and they span academics. We had the former CEO of Sanofi Pasteur. We had certain people who were very, very deep domain experts in one area of interest to us. So we had a massive group. We ended up changing it from a scientific advisory board to a strategic advisory board. And we initially met with all of them, tried to meet on like a quarterly basis. We got to the point later on where it was so big that just didn't make sense anymore. So we would have either kind of subset discussions or one-on-one discussions as the focus. But there's really no limitation, in my opinion, on how big that gets. If somebody's going to add value, go give them a token amount of equity and grow that advisory board.
Yeah, interesting that you did that. So a strong recommendation many of you have heard before is to do this advisory board concept, and it'll evolve and change. So we also now, if I tallied them up, have had 20 advisors over time. First, we had this like market-specific advisory group that was targeting the markets we thought we were going to enter first. We had 5 of them. We met quarterly. We pivoted out and ended up disbanding it more or less. But they got equity, and they still call and check on their shares. So like, when are you going to sell the company? We want our money kind of calls. But it's at this point, more is better. And you may be a little bit of a chameleon. Like in the room, you may, as long as they would answer a reference call, right? You can't bullshit them. But as long as they would take a reference call and say, yes, I'm an advisor. Yes, I'm excited about these guys. They've got a unique market perspective. As long as that level of diligence is in place, because I would anticipate they're going to do that, then if you've got 3 or 4, you can pick the ones you think are best for that audience at the time you're in the room.
Got it. Super helpful. And just to follow up on that, there seems to be 2 types of people we meet. One is like science and people in the space. And then there are people who just know who's who, like professors at HBS, like have nothing to do really with batteries, but they just somehow know the top people. Is it worth just getting them on early, even if that might not be like a long-lasting support, because it's helpful for the first 5, 6 intros, but after that, not really?
I would say absolutely. I would say if there's no downside, and you will probably change what you need over time. Like we pivoted, we had this initial advisory board for the market we thought we were going to go into. That market didn't work either. I'm telling you, we tried a lot of things that didn't work until we found the thing that did. And then when we found the thing we did, we actually brought a new guy who is a domain expert onto our board, our actual board of directors board. So it's fine to pick different people over time. It's fine to pick big. Give them a little bit of equity. Most people who they want to help you because they're excited about you. But it's nice to, if they got a couple shares, if you don't have that yet, you could just say our intention is to give early options to our advisory board, and we're not ready to do that yet, but we'd like to include you in that when we're ready. That works.
And I think there's a third bucket of people that we ended up adding maybe 2 advisors that were probably 5 to 8 years ahead of us in building something similar. And so those folks didn't necessarily have a big name. They didn't necessarily have great connections. But when you got into the detailed pragmatics of, hey, do you have a copy of an LOI you could share with me? They had it, right? Who did you work with for payroll, for insurance? Like, how do I think about, the kind of maybe the nitty gritty operations? We had 2 of those folks on our advisory board. They spent more time with us than anyone else. So that was kind of the third bucket of advisors that we added that were fantastic as a first-time entrepreneur.
Thank you.
Great. Well, good luck. Sounds like you guys are in an exciting place, and it's important work, so I'm glad you're doing it. Chris, I'm excited to know. Last time I talked to you, Chris, I think you were changing what you were working on, so I'm excited to know what you're working on now.
That's right, yeah. So I'm building an ingestible microbiome sensor.
Okay.
Ultimately, the vision would be to create a diagnostic for microbiome assessment. We know that the microbiome is incredibly influential to human health. It prevents and is also involved in the progression of a ton of different disease states, specifically chronic diseases, but it hasn't yet been translated to clinical medicine. A big assumption that I have, and I think a lot of people in the field have, is that ultimately it will become part of clinical practice. And I like to be positioned at that point as like the leader in microbiome testing. Specifically, I'm focusing on testing microbiome metabolites, which are the small molecules that the microbiome bacteria create. There are existing companies out there that will do genetic assessment and tell like kind of the diversity of what species are present in generally a fecal sample. It seems like that's not the best definition of what is a healthy microbiome because there's so much redundancy. Like you could have different species that play the same role within the ecosystem. So moving towards a metabolomic definition of what is a healthy microbiome. So that's the ultimate vision of the company. The go-to-market strategy, though, is a little bit unique. I'm targeting this initially towards longevity enthusiasts. The reason being is because you could get to revenue more quickly. I would need 510K FDA approval to sell and market this, but would not necessarily need the clinical trials and things to get an insurance reimbursement code for something like this. That ultimately is what I would like to do. But for now, what I'm imagining is that you could sell this as a direct-to-consumer device after an initial consultation with a GI doc to ensure that you're not contraindicated for usage of this. I could then ship it to a person's house. They would take this thing. It's a pill-shaped med device that would travel through their gut, get data about their gut health, and then ultimately they pass it in their stool. You can flush it. Everybody asks that question. You can flush it. And it would give data to your phone about the various concentrations of these different molecules. So certainly tough tech. Nothing like this has been commercialized. There are patents I've identified from MIT that I think similar to everybody else here, have had questions on how to establish credibility as I approach the PI. But I think for now, the big question I have is how to do demand validation for something like this, because it is B2C fundamentally. I know generally, especially with like the mom test and Professor Austin was like, you want revenue when people pull out their credit card and actually pay for something. That's how you prove demand to VCs. I can't do that because this thing isn't developed quite yet. So I feel kind of stuck with doing wait lists or email lists or things like that, which doesn't seem as legitimate as an LOI from a large potential customer, and also doesn't seem as legitimate as some low amount of revenue from early users. So from a customer discovery perspective, that was my big challenge. I'm thinking, I don't know if I have other great options, but of building a landing page and getting individuals who are interested in that and are willing to sign up for that kind of, hey, we're interested in you being an early user. I've also thought about doing like a GoFundMe kind of thing. The runway to get to sending them an early product would be a very, very long time. So I don't know if people would have the patience for that, but could in theory get some level of cash from people who are interested, and then have just deferred revenue on the books for 5 years or something before I send them something. But that was what we talked about. I think the people I spoke with agreed that that's probably useful. Grant mentioned doing some kind of other inbound thing, like partnering with bloggers or Instagram influencers in the space. Not exactly sure what I'm building at this point, so that feels a little bit premature as well. So yeah, I would be curious to hear you guys' thoughts on early customer demand validation.
Yeah. So, well, you've got this sounds like it's adjacent to you. Why don't you go first? Because I have an idea, but I'll bet you've got a better idea.
Yeah, so I think this question of how do you actually confirm someone will pull out their credit card and pay is such a common question when you're going to kind of direct consumer or B2C. The approach that I have seen others use, have never used it myself, is to actually build the site and allow customers to go all the way through to the process of putting in their credit card information. And then when they hit submit, the sign comes back and says, unfortunately, this product is sold out. We'll notify you when it's back in stock. So you're actually getting the data of going all the way through the sales process. And you can use that for some period of time. Maybe you put this up for 2 weeks, you spend some money on Google ads or Facebook ads, whatever, and you can use that at least to build a true picture of what your funnel looks like and gather the data you need to kind of validate that. You can obviously test pricing, you can test a lot of different things in that ecosystem, and then simply at the end, you are not capturing their credit card information, you are not selling them a product, and you're notifying them it's out of stock, and you'll let them know when it's back in stock. So I've seen others use that to kind of build out the statistics around that funnel, and also, again, kind of A/B test various different approaches to the marketing, the landing page, the process, the sales funnel, all the way through. So that's one idea I've seen used successfully.
I was thinking of by reference or by proxy. So either, a lot of times people will get communities of interest around a specific disease type, for example, to get interested in something and then to provide some sort of endorsement, even if it's just a presentation credit or something. So for like diabetes products, there are a lot of communities of interest around diabetes that you can get out in front of, talk about your solution, and get some kind of endorsement. Not an official, they all voted and you're the number one of all time, but something you could put as a letter of reference, like, this patient group of interest has heard the story, they understand it well, they support it, and they are supportive of it. I also don't know if there are other companies that have been successful in this sort of direct pay medical product to consumer, but a lot of times in a pitch, you're like Uber for dinosaurs or something. Like you're piggybacking on some kind of proxy of something similar. So I think if I was prepping for a trial VC run, I would probably do that. I would probably try to assemble by proxy, and then by reference, I would try to get some groups that I could get interested enough to do a reference. And then I like this idea a lot of pushing a full willingness to commit, willingness to transact. I think that would be interesting. The other thing I might try, and we could certainly do this through the MSMBA stuff, is if you feel you're ready, you could do a friendly VC pitch for somebody that's not, it's a friend of the program, basically. Because they would tell you the last 3 things they saw, what got funded, what they needed to see to fund. That maybe won't tell you what you need to know about how much you want to spend time on this, but it's a useful information point for me if I'm looking at something new, like what do the investors need to see, what are they focused in on? Because other people who are getting funded for a similar product idea are going to have the same problem for getting, true validation.
You actually sparked one thought for me. One company that there's an HBS alum who founded a company called Nix Biosensors, Nix. The founder's name is Meredith Unger. I love Meredith. She's a fantastic entrepreneur. Nix basically developed a hydration sensor that was targeted for high-performance athletes. So you wear this sensor essentially on your arm as you're competing in various sports. It is sending data to your phone about your hydration levels and notifying you when you need to consume more. It was an interesting product because it was initially a very small niche, right? High performance athletes who really care enough about hydration monitoring. So she had to do a lot of what you're, I think, trying to do, is to figure out what is the interest and demand going to look like amongst that group of super high performance athletes in order to get funding to build the device. And they have now done that successfully. They've launched the device, they're selling, they're now looking at other applications like construction workers and things like that. But she had the very same, I think, similar issue to you. Meredith is fantastic. So I'd ping her through LinkedIn or HBS Network, say I sent you her way. I have no doubt she'll respond. If not, ping me. Happy to connect you with her.
She was an iLab graduate, and she was a fellow,
Blavatnik fellow.
Exactly. So
yep.
she's part of the whole ecosystem.
Exactly.
And she used to be a presenter for a bunch of stuff.
She's
a couple
great.
Years ago. She's great. Okay, so my other action item is I'll think of people who might be adjacent to the same kind of problem, Chris, and see if I can scare up any other ideas. And if you want to do a warm intro to a VC pitch in the relevant space, let me know, and I can. You probably have the same thing, but I could try to dig some people up who are friends of the program.
Yeah, that'd be great. Also, too, and I think Adi hit on my questions around this, but I'm looking for advisors to kind of provide legitimacy, particularly as I approach the labs that have relevant IP available for licensing.
Okay. Yeah, come back when you're in the licensing shoot, because it's very specific, but it's a little bit of a formula, and yeah, I'd love to talk to you about it when you're in the middle of that.
Cool. Sounds great.
Good. All right. Thanks, Chris. Conrad, I see your hand, and so were you out delivering something to a customer?
I was actually receiving in material.
Okay.
When a truck shows up, I'm the one guy running the warehouse, so truck shows up, I gotta take care of it.
Yeah, that's right. You got customers to take care of. Yep.
Yeah. Before I jump into my thing, I did actually just want to offer an idea to Chris. Is I think with the pill thing, you mentioned in our little breakout that people might be reticent to have a pill that, effectively a pill they take every day. But I think a lot of people really do that as part of their normal routine. So I don't think that's actually that bad. Like, people take daily vitamins all the time, amongst other supplements and stuff. That's super in with the like woo-woo people, as you coined it. What could be interesting is also seeing, instead of like this longevity idea, which could be like the holy grail of, okay, we collect all the data on all the things and like we solve all the problems, but in terms of who your customers are, maybe there's that one group, kind of like these high performance athletes who want hydration. Maybe there's one group with a really specific need that you find out through your landing page. It's like, oh, that's the group that actually has this problem that I could try to solve. So for example, something that came to mind is I have a lot of friends who are like totally debilitated by like Crohn's disease or IBS or things like that. Like they'll take anything because they're just looking for a way to live like a normal life and not like suffer through all that comes with it. So that's just one idea of a group who might be super willing to pay for a little thing that they eat, and whatever it tells them, I don't know. Like that's you and your big brain to figure out, but that's a possibility.
Yeah, another good community of interest idea.
Yeah, totally. That gets into the diagnostic space, and I'd be making a clinical claim. So I'd like to get there eventually, but I think for initially what I'd be doing is providing data that is for informational purposes only, similar to the way an Apple Watch or a Garmin does. And ultimately would like to target different disease states, but that's a much more capital intensive project to pursue. But that's a good idea to have, like, these people are passionate about this as an early support group and reference.
Yeah, or at least like if people sign up on your webpage, like, hey, what is the thing that they're hoping to get from it? If it's a little drop down menu or a like text entry, like then you know what they're specifically looking for.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was a company that so Conrad's a good idea that reminded me of a company that was pretty successful that made specialized meal sets for people with extreme food allergies, and they basically found this one group of people who were like all connected, desperate for a solution, willing to try anything, and that became like the initial reference group. It wasn't a big enough market by itself to make a successful company, but it got them going, got these fanatical endorsements. So if there's a community of interest like that, that could be a good approach. I think I saw another hand. Marquita?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep. Sounds good.
I was just going to respond to Conrad and Chris. So I agree that Conrad's idea in the long term could potentially be helpful for thinking through having patients who have GI pathologies for this would be more interesting. But I agree with Chris that I would recommend not starting there because for just risk perspective, those patients are going to tend to be the ones who have higher risk related to their intestinal integrity. So I think if there are any patient population where they're more likely to have intestinal perforation or anything happen inside their gut, you don't want it to be associated with your product, should that be potentially the case for those patients. So I just figured from a physician standpoint, I would just chime in. But I do think that thinking about that being a long-term goal from a diagnostic perspective could be, I think, potentially lucrative, but just wanting you to like mitigate that risk and try to choose like a healthier gut population from the beginning would help to
Are
take
you
out
an
some
MD,
of
MBA?
I am, yes.
Okay, we should chat. I'll pick it up.
Happy to.
My mom has Crohn's disease and just had a big event with, perforated intestines. So, small world. Okay, Chris, are we good? Because I do want to hear from Conrad in the couple of minutes we have left about where he's at with his venture. Okay. So, Conrad, tell me what you're up to.
Sure. So I'm helping a specialty high performance chemical distributor get off the ground. The way we got started is that we have a group of former 3M veterans who worked in their fire protection business. So these are guys who spent majority of their careers both selling and on the engineering side developing chemicals that are used to put out, really difficult to put out fires. So things that would be relevant today, like lithium-ion batteries, that's a little plug for you, Aditya. But also things like data centers or like museums where you need to use chemicals that can put out fires without using water, and then also without damaging the equipment. So we're focused specifically on the fluids themselves and getting those to partners who are usually the end installers. So, new factory goes up, new data center goes up. They're contracting with somebody who has the actual equipment and sprinkler system, yada, yada. And then we're the ones who give the fluid to that equipment provider, and then they fill it and have it on site, so on and so forth. We have so I'll pause there. Any questions with the background or other context?
No, I think I get it. What's the biggest problem in front of you?
Biggest problem is getting ourselves into like more lucrative businesses with like recurring revenue, because we have this fire protection business, which we have all the connections to, and it gets us off the ground. But in the like 5 to 10 year horizon, it's like, how do we get ourselves designed into products that aren't in that space? Because there's actually a lot more gross margin to make on things that are for like immersion cooling in data centers or being involved in like EV fire suppression systems or cooling systems. Because these chemicals have a wide array of applications, but it's just tough to get in. Being on the mechanical design side in a previous life, it's super hard to be the guy who gets your product designed in. But once it happens, you're set, because it's super hard to get it out.
Do you, against alternatives, so the data center build out system is just going crazy. We serve that space, particularly for AI. And a lot of the data centers are being contract built out by people like Turner Construction, who are doing basically the design build of data center build out. So if you're going to go into a meeting with this guy, so I know somebody who's running that division, if you're going to go and meet with him, how would you position like your advantage? Do you have a product advantage? Do you have a technical expertise advantage? How would you position?
We have the best technical expertise for using this type of fluid, because we have the guy in our team who's a founder was the guy who invented the fluid in the first place. So we have all the data, all the knowledge, all the capability to provide that on-site support as they design. And then in terms of performance, which is something that data centers really care about, probably among all else, is that we can show with data how much more efficiency they get by using our fluid as their cooling mechanism, like direct on-ship immersion versus any other type of liquid to air heat transfer, et cetera, or using heat sinks. We're able to reduce the cost of install, but then also increase their performance and power output density. So that's the sales pitch that I would make. Okay, so you can position, you're basically like a super niche expert shop, engineering shop that also sells product for recurring revenue, and you've culled it from all the best people in the industry. So if you were going to sell head to head against whoever the incumbent is that these guys came from, have you workshopped what that presentation looks like? Because it's sort of a one-shot thing. Like if you got an intro for these guys or these gals, you'd go in and say, here's what we are, here's why we're useful, here's what your next problem is, we know what that is, we're already designing to it. If it's not a well-formed question. I guess I'm thinking through, I'm coming in after the incumbent, right? So I know what the incumbent sales pitch looks like. The incumbent might not even be immersion cooling even, which is the specific way that we're doing the heat transfer from all the servers. And so it could just be asking, hey, this is probably how you're doing it now. This is what you could get as better if you used our product instead. Okay, so it's actually a different technology approach, basically. Okay. Well, I guess the action item for us, if you feel like you're ready and you've worked up this presentation and you've got copies of how the other guy's presenting and you know exactly what they're saying before you go in and you're really ready, I guess the action item I would have would be to try to find some people to connect you with that would be of interest to this. And I can work on it. So we support the basically the router switch guys that are in data farm build out. And so their specifier is probably
like the Aristas of the world. So it might maybe a little bit of a homework, but if you want to focus on this on the server space, we could definitely help. I could help scare up some people who could at least give you some feedback.
That would be great, because I don't even know where, it seems like everybody's building data centers, but who those people actually are that do the design and build, I'm not necessarily sure.
Okay.
One other thought, Conrad, is typically if I'm looking to enter kind of a market like this, I'm going to go figure out who the best salespeople are at your competitors that are already selling into it, and I'm going to try and poach them. So if you know who your competitors are, ping them and say, hey, I'd love to talk to your salespeople. Say, we're exploring something new. Love to talk to your salespeople. Kind of do it as a way of getting to figure out who their best salespeople are. And somebody who can come in who's already got those relationships, who's got the network, who knows the sales process, they could shortcut your process significantly. So I try and figure out who those people are, see if there's any chance you could poach one of them.
That's a good thought.
Yeah.
We've got a crack. I don't want to take away from our team. We have a crack team already. But you're right. Having the specific players for the industry, that would go a long way.
Yeah, and I bet you'll be able to network your way to some of those people, like you said. Just talking to them is useful too.
Agreed.
Because they'll tell you. You can try your pitch out on them, see what they say.
Exactly.
So okay, well that's cool. It's fun that you're kind of more in an execution mode. Like you're in kind of a much later stage problem than a lot of early tough tech stuff. So.
Yeah, we are. I mentioned to Ben and Emily when they were reaching out, I said, well, I could volunteer, but I'm maybe one step ahead of the game here. We know we have PMF, but it's just a matter of, how to find the right customers who, have a lot of money to spend and also would find PMF in a new way.
Yeah. If you've got like a white paper too, the other thing that I've used successfully is hired believe it or not, there are people who are like geniuses at working LinkedIn and getting white papers in front of the right job titles. And I'm probably just lazy, so I haven't figured it out myself. But we have a guy on our team who will probably be available soon working as a contractor who is great at that. He's kind of technical. And what you could do is you could find someone like that, and for small dollars, just get in front of the right job title for everybody that could be relevant and pump the white paper out to them. And that will help start some conversations. That's how we do most of our lead gen for like really niche technical stuff. And it's not very expensive. I mean, making a white paper is free, and then, you're paying $100 an hour or $50 an hour, and they can do 10-hour blocks of time. It's not a lot of money to try it. Okay, well, Conrad, I'll keep thinking about it, and
Thank you.
I have an idea I need to think about a little bit more. There's somebody who's downstream 2 steps who's sort of a technology enthusiast who might talk to you more about how specification and design works and where the volume is. Because lately the AI data center stuff has just gone absolutely totally bananas. And so they would know who the specifiers are and who the build-out people are now better than I would. So maybe I'll see if they want to talk to you.
Yeah.
That's excellent. Thanks a lot, Tom. I'll be in touch.
Okay. Yeah, Aditya?
Yeah, I've been down this rabbit hole because we're also trying to find data centers for batteries, and I went down the wrong path. So data center companies always look for consultants who actually build the data center for them. So I didn't find too much success talking to data center companies themselves. They have consultants like L&T, all these EPC companies that like just focus on building data centers. And usually the data center company is more focused on their sales and like more like computer science related stuff and actually like building the data center. So I don't want you to go down that route. It's more like construction companies really and consultants who actually do the building of the data center.
Yeah, the guy I'm thinking of is the head of the Turner construction practice for data center.
Exactly.
Yeah, and so that's what he does, and it's sort of a turnkey thing. People like say, I want this much capacity, and he's like, okay, it'll be $100 million. Then he goes and builds it for him and hands him the keys.
Yep.
So okay, well that's good stuff to work on there, Conrad. So I'll think about someone who can give a better perspective on where the action is and activity is and who the design build specifiers are, and I'll also. Also think about if there's some contacts that are there that might be helpful. And if you want to do a little bit of a lead gen exercise with a white paper and a little bit of contract time or something you can figure out yourself, it's a cheap experiment, and you may be able to get 10 people to raise their hand and say, yeah, I'm interested in learning more, and that'll teach you something that I think will help you target better.
That's an excellent idea.
Okay, we are at end of time, I think, Emily. Is that right? We went a little bit over. You guys are gluttons for punishment. Probably the most important thing is that we're available to help. So the executive fellows basically are here only as a service to you. The only reason anyone would choose to be an executive fellow is if they want to give back and are interested in being helpful if they can. So our contact info, maybe if you could put up the slide that I have up now, it just has our email addresses. Yeah, please reach out to us if you have a question over the summer. If we're not the right people, we can find somebody who's smart in what you're looking at. Just 30 minutes Zoom to bounce an idea off people or try to get some expertise. That's sort of what we're here for, and very happy to provide that to you. And I guess any questions before we break? Hope this is helpful. I may call a few of you and get suggestions for format. Every time we do this, we do it differently. We haven't hit a stride yet for how we run this session. We'll reach back out to you, I guess, and try to get some feedback on how useful was the setup, how useful was the kind of fireside intermediate version we did, and then how useful was this workshopping period, because we can stretch and modify and make this better next time. Okay, I think that's it. Emily, do we say goodbye? Are we all set?
Yeah, no, just a big thank
Okay.
you to both Tom and Michael for doing this today, and thanks to everyone for joining.
Yeah, great, and enjoy your summer. Good luck with your venture.
Thanks, everybody.